A slow preseason and a slow start to the season had people wondering if something was going on with Desmond Bane. But guess what? After these last two games, no one's asking that question anymore. The question that they're asking now is, can this guy be an all-star this season? He's playing like it, and the Grizzlies are playing at a high level as well. A 125-110 win over the Kings. The bench shined. And guess what? We're going to recap all of that right here, right now, coming up on Locked On Grizzlies.
You are Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everyone, and welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies. I am your solo host for today, Damichael Cole, beat writer of the Commercial Appeal right here in Memphis, Tennessee. Once again, I want to thank you and appreciate you for tuning in to Locked On Grizzlies. Make sure you continue to like, comment, subscribe, leave us reviews on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, wherever you listen. Leave those reviews so we can see how we need to improve the show. Leave those comments on YouTube so we can see what we need to do to continue to make this show better for you, the fans. And we appreciate you once again. And make sure you're listening everywhere. Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, because Locked On Grizzlies, we're everywhere, just like the air. So thank you for tuning in to today's episode as well. But man, this team just can't stop, can they? No matter who's in, no matter who's out, the Grizzlies just keep persevering. Added a new name to the injury list in this 125-110 win against the Sacramento Kings. John Conchar was out in this game due to shoulder soreness. So, again, the rotation got a little tighter, and the Grizzlies managed pretty well. And someone on the wing had to step up, right? Because now you're talking Morant, Tyus Jones, and Desmond Bane primarily getting most of the backcourt minutes without John Conchar being active. So someone had to step up. And man, it was multiple guys, but one guy, he stood out above the rest, and that was Desmond Bane. Desmond Bane really shined in this game. 31 points, 6 rebounds, 4 assists, 11 of 18 shooting from the field, 6 of 8 on three-pointers, and he was plus 13 in his 33 minutes. Why is that plus 13 important? Well, if you look at the rest of the stars, Morant was plus 2 in 32 minutes. Santi Aldama was plus 1. Dylan Brooks was minus 7. And Steven Adams was plus 2 in 24 minutes. Shout out to Steven Adams as well. He had a big game, I think, as well. It's 12 points, 11 rebounds, 4 assists for the big Kiwi in this game. All while, he missed a couple free throws, had 4 turnovers. But Steven Adams, I mean, he dominated the glass. And I think more than anything, he limited Domantas Sabonis. Sabonis, 11 points, 11 rebounds, 9 assists, but only shot 4 of 6. And quite frankly, got bruised, kind of got beat up a little bit in that matchup against Steven Adams. But we're talking about Bane. We're talking about Desmond Bane and the big night that he had. And never was it more apparent to me that this guy is ready to take that leap, that leap towards, where we're talking about, could he be an all-star? Could he be a potential, one of those players where he and Morant could enter that conversation as one of, if not the best backcourt in the NBA. Desmond Bane, near the end of the first half, Keegan Murray, rookie for Sacramento Kings, is tightly guarding him. I mean, he's wearing them like a jacket. I mean, he's everywhere, all over Desmond Bane. So Desmond Bane is kind of pinned towards the sideline. I mean, on the baseline, and he goes back. He goes back towards the three-point line. Clock's winding down. It's the final seconds of the first half. Does a snatchback crossover dribble, shoots a three-pointer from the corner, nails it right in his eye. And it's like, man, that's one of those shots when you're a defender, you just hump your shoulder. You say, what was I supposed to do? What was I supposed to do, coach? What did you want me to do differently? The guy made that shot. And then in the third quarter, top of the key, Again, does a couple dribble moves, snatch back at the top of the three-point line, shoots it again, bottom of the nets. That's all you heard was the bottom of the nets moving. No rim, no nothing. So Desmond Bane is locked in right now. And I mean, 6 of 8 from the three-point line. And mind you, this comes after a 38-point performance against the Brooklyn Nets, in which he shot 8 of 11 on three-pointers. So, there was all this talk. Is Desmond Bane all right? And I said on here, he wasn't worried. Taylor Jenkins wasn't worried. More than anything, it was a conditioning. He talked about, that early season conditioning, how it'll be different from how he'll be conditioned in January, how he'll be conditioned in March after the All-Star break, how he'll be conditioned in the playoffs, So he wasn't worried one bit, and now we see why. And what's impressed me more than anything, the assist numbers are up, the free throw attempts are up, and he's getting to the basket. Desmond Bane, we saw last season, we saw the guy, who broke the Grizzlies' three-point shooting record. And I think he showed some things where off the dribble, he take a couple pump fakes, the flyby king, as Brevin Knight calls him. He does the flyby. He get to the mid-range, knock down that mid-range jumper that he has with a couple dribbles. But now we're seeing Desmond Bane pound the rock to the basket. And, I mean, we've seen him go at, Nick Claxton, big, 6'11", 7-foot guy for the Nets. And we're seeing him go at Domantas Sabonis, 6'10", 6'11" guy for the Kings. We're seeing him go at whoever is in the paint, whoever is in his way. I mean, I've talked yesterday about Davion Off-Night Mitchell, right? Highly regarded defender out of Baylor, led them to a national championship. And again, he has that nickname Off-Night because that's usually what players have when they're guarded by Davion Mitchell. Well, there's one play in particular where, I mean, it was a grown man drive to the basket by Desmond Bane where he kind of just put his shoulder into Davion Mitchell's chest and he did a rip through. And Mitchell just he couldn't mess with him. And after that play, you know what Desmond Bane did? He flexed. He flexed, looked at the bench, did a little flex just to let him know, I'm a strong guy. This ain't no college boy right here. So Desmond Bane is on a heater right now. And what does that mean for the Grizzlies? You see it. Ja Morant, he didn't even have he had a quiet game by his standards, and he still had 22 points, 6 assists on 8 of 18 shooting. Ja Morant and Desmond Bane, if you're getting 20 plus from that backcourt and you're getting the shooting, this caliber shooting from Desmond Bane where he made 6 3-pointers in this game. In the last game, he made 8 3-pointers. This team's going to be tough to beat because what you have is Taylor Jenkins likes to stagger those two guys, meaning, if Ja Morant isn't in the game, Desmond Bane is more than likely going to be in the game. And if Desmond Bane isn't in the game, Ja Morant more than likely is going to be in the game. And if you have one of those high-level scorers in the game at all time, that's why the Grizzlies, it's going to put them in position to not have those big scoring lows that we've seen, time and time again in spurts last season, especially in, those series against the Timberwolves where they'd have to crawl themselves out of a hole in the fourth quarter, and then against the Golden State Warriors where those late fourth quarters, they just weren't able to score. But now you have both of these guys in the game at the same time. It's a scary sight. And I said on Twitter yesterday, it's not the fact that Desmond Bane is playing well right now, that he's hot, that he's making a lot of 3-point shots and he's making these shots heavily contested. It's more than that. The bag is deeper. These crossover step back threes that Desmond Bane has, he can get that shot off against pretty much anyone. And as long as he's creating that little 5-6 inches, half a foot of separation when he does that snatch back and he can see the rim, he can get that shot off. And as we saw in this last game against the Kings, he can make it. I mean, he made it multiple times. And then you factor in the playmaking, right? I mean, the guy is another game with 4 or more assists. So that means 4 of the 5 games this season, Desmond Bane has had 4 or more assists. The playmaking, the shooting. Taylor Jenkins, even after the game, complimented his defense as a two-way guy. He think he's playing well on the defensive end as well. So You factor in all of those things, and what you're getting out of Desmond Bane right now is a guy who straight up is looking like he could be an all-star. Look around the shooting guards in the Western Conference. Desmond Bane is starting to make headways and say, hey, I'm one of those guys. The shooting, the attacking the basket. He's going to make his free throws more times than not. He's one of the better free throw shooters in the NBA right now. You factor in all of that, and the Grizzlies, they have themselves a star-studded backcourt. But it wasn't just the backcourt. It wasn't just Steven Adams, as I mentioned earlier, and it wasn't just the starting lineup. The bench had their best performance of the season. We're going to break that down and talk about that coming up after the break. But before we talk about that bench, I want to talk about prize picks. See, the thing about prize picks that I love is prize picks takes you to the game within the game. You might say, oh, well, what do I mean by that? It's daily fantasy, and all you have to do is make these entries, right? Tonight, you could say, oh, I'm taking Ja Morant to score more than 22.5 points. You probably would have fell short of that goal. But if you took Desmond Bane to go over, 24.5, 25 points in the last two games on prize picks, then guess what? You'd be pretty successful. The game within the game prize picks comes from you can go the Steven Adams rebounds. How about, you say, oh, I think that even I got Tyus Jones will make more than 2.5 3-pointers. The format is very easy. The entries, they're very easy to make. And look, I win off prize picks. And here's all you have to do. Pick 2 or 5 players daily. And if they go over or score more or less than the prize pick projections, you can win up to 10 times your money on any entry. You're not competing against other people. It's only the projections against yourself. So here's what you got to do. All you got to do is download the Prize Picks apps or go over to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with the promo code Locked On. So again, if you deposit $100 and you're a new user, Prize Picks will give you $100. If you deposit $50, they're going to give you $50. All you have to do is enter the promo code Locked On to receive that deposit match. Well, the Grizzlies bench did not match their first 4 games performance in this game against the King. They exceeded it. They exceeded it by a lot. And I've talked a lot about this bench because if we're just keeping it a buck here, if we're just being honest, Grizzlies bench hasn't been good. It has been one of the bigger disappointments in the early part of the season throughout all the team's success. And you can say there is an excuse for that. They don't have Zaire Williams, who will be playing off this bench. They don't, have Jaren Jackson Jr. in the starting lineup, which would ultimately move Santi Aldama, who's having a pretty good second season, by the way, to the bench. So they don't have Zaire Williams and Santi Aldama factored into their rotation. You're breaking in a couple rookies, right? So you get the ebbs and flows that come with playing rookies, but throw all that out of the window, You have Tyus Jones, who's the highest paid backup point guard in the NBA. You have Brandon Clarke, who just got a comparable contract to starting centers like Robert Williams and Wendell Carter. So you expect big production out of those guys, and that should be enough to keep the Grizzlies in the top tier of benches, right? Not through the first 4 games, but this was the game. The breakout came against the Kings. I think the bench, this was their best performance to date. Jake LaRavia, 13 points. Tyus Jones, 14 points. Brandon Clarke, 16 points. Overall, the bench put up 45 points against the King. 3 players in double figures. Tyus Jones got the ball rolling, right? We talked about him. He's the highest paid backup point guard in the NBA. And these guys on this bench have said some pretty declarative things, in the past couple of weeks. And then starting with Tyus Jones, one thing that Tyus Jones said was he's definitely going to be more aggressive in looking for his shot with Zaire Williams out. Now, I've talked about it. You seeing Tyus Jones take over 11 shots per game, which is well above, his career high. He's never even taken 8 shots per game, as an NBA player. And in this game, 14 points, 5 assists, 6-11 shooting from the field from Tyus Jones. As a result, plus 18 in 24 minutes of action. So Tyus Jones, I thought it was going to be a big game for him because now you needed him to be that backcourt man. As I mentioned earlier, Ja Morant and Desmond Bane in this game, pretty much they were staying in the game. If when one goes out, the other would be in the game. And Tyus Jones was the backcourt mate. So Tyus Jones played with Ja. They did that pairing early in the first quarter. And then when Ja went out of the game, Desmond Bane checked back in. And it was Tyus Jones and Desmond Bane towards the early part of the second quarter. So you're getting, those pairings with Tyus Jones. And he's basically that third starter. He always said, last season as he was entering, free agency, he always said, I view myself as a starter. Those were Tyus Jones' words. And now you're seeing why, because he's playing, a starter caliber role with these guys, with Desmond Bane and Ja Morant. You mentioned 24 minutes, 14 points, 5 assists, plus 18 from the field. And then Brandon Clarke. It was a struggle, and it kind of like Desmond Bane. I was wondering, that Brandon Clarke, he just got paid, right? Just got this nice contract. First 3 games of the season, scores in single figures. Plus minus was really bad. And you started to wonder what's going on with Brandon Clarke. Well, had a big night. He had a big night in this game. 16 points, 3 rebounds, 3 assists. How about that crafty finish early in the fourth quarter? Where did that come from? Brandon Clarke drove to the basket, did a spin move, and I think he did 2 dribbles. Two dribbles, did a spin move, laid it in over the contested defense after the spin move. I mean, he looked like Ja Morant. That's who he looked like. But another big night for him. He was plus 11 in 23 minutes as well. 2 steals, 1 block. Taylor Jenkins always talks about the defensive versatility and the activity of Brandon Clarke. It was evident again in this game. And then let's go over to the rookie. As we mentioned at the top of the show, no John Conchar in this game. Zaire Williams is out 4 to 6 weeks. Danny Green is out. Who's going to step up? It has to be David Roddy or Jake LaRavia. One of them have to step up. It's pretty much by default at this point. And man, boy, did Jake LaRavia ever. I saw the signs. I said that game, before the game against the Brooklyn Nets, I'm going to keep saying it. I should have took video of it. That's my bad on that part. But the way this guy was shooting the ball in that shoot-around, the ball was completely, it was touching the bottom of the net. And that's when I said, this guy has the shooting stroke. We see the jumper is nice, right? But that was my first time just seeing him not miss. Like high-level NBA shooters, when they're shooting in shoot-arounds and practices and stuff, they don't miss. You're talking about 8 of 10 type shooting, from these guys. And Jake LaRavia showed that. So that's why when he played the Brooklyn Nets, and he went into that game and, he didn't really do, too much against the Brooklyn Nets. I think he actually went scoreless. And I was kind of surprised. Said, what? Jake LaRavia just had this great shoot around and he went scoreless. So then I was wondering, said, man, no John Conchar. Do you go to your two-way guy? Do you bring in Vince Williams? He's been a solid shooter, and you give him a couple minutes. Do you shorten the rotation? And the answer was the Grizzlies went to a 9-man rotation. Jake LaRavia ended up playing 30 minutes, and check these numbers out: 13 points, 9 rebounds, 5 of 6 overall shooting, 3 of 4 on 3-pointers, a steal, and a team high. I repeat, a team high plus 24 from the field in those 30 minutes. I talk time and time again. Taylor Jenkins, Ja Morant, and we saw, if you watch the post-game interview with Rob Fisher of Bally Sports, you can hear Tyus Jones in the background in Jake LaRavia's ear as he's talking with Rob Fisher, saying, shoot the ball, Rook. You know why? That's the message the team has been echoing to him since he's been a part of the Grizzlies organization. Shoot the ball. And, man, he's shooting the ball right now. 9 of 15 to start his NBA career from three-point range, 60% that is. And his breakout game, the 13 points were crucial. No, don't get me wrong, but, man, I was just as impressed with the 9 rebounds. It was something that his teammates kind of implored on him. The coaches, they challenged him. We need to see you rebound the ball more. Why? Because eventually you want him to be comfortable with playing more of those small ball 4 minutes. And if he's playing that role, he's going to have to rebound. So this was a big performance for Jake LaRavia. I think he is starting to separate himself from David Roddy in that competition between the two rookies and who's going to step up and earn those minutes, when, Jaren Jackson Jr. or Zaire Williams potentially get back and one less rotation spot is available. I think Jake LaRavia definitely answered those questions. David Roddy struggled a little bit more in this game. 18 minutes, 2 points, 3 rebounds, 1 of 4 shooting from the field, or 3 from the three-point line. Still figuring it out. I told you that they like his defensive versatility, but overall, he's still figuring it out. What we're going to figure out about the Grizzlies this weekend is how will they play against a team that has some similar traits. They take on the Utah Jazz. We're going to talk about that coming up after the break. But before we go into the break, I want to talk to you about Locked On Game Today. That's Locked On Sports Today, excuse me. But thank you for making Locked On Grizzlies your first listen on today. Now I want you to make Locked On Sports your second listen. Locked On Sports Today. All you have to do is go over to the YouTube, Spotify, Stitcher podcast, wherever you get wherever you listen, wherever you get your apps, wherever you get your podcasts. Locked On Sports Today is there. Thing about Locked On Sports Today is it's from the games that matter the most to the biggest stories in sports. This is where you go beyond the scoreboard, behind the scenes, with the local experts, the insight that only Locked On can provide. Again, that's available everywhere: YouTube, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts. Locked On Sports Today. Go check it out. Man, the Grizzlies, they're 4-1. That's no surprise. But you know who is 4-1 is a surprise? It's the Utah Jazz. People made a mockery of them this offseason, the disgruntled relationship between Rudy Gobert, Donovan Mitchell. Then, Rudy Gobert gets traded. Just kind of hits people out of nowhere with how much they get back for him. And then people wonder, are they going to keep Donovan Mitchell? Are they going to build around him? Are they going to trade him? And everyone thought he was going to New York, and then he gets shipped to Cleveland. So now you have this revamped roster in Utah that looks completely different, and everyone's expecting them to tank. Now they're 4-1, and they'll have the best record of any Grizzlies opponent to date. I think this is going to be a fun 2 games to watch. We're going to talk about the first game because we'll get to that second matchup on Monday on our Monday episode of Locked On Grizzlies. But Saturday's game against Utah, I think it'll be fun. For one, it's one of those altitude games. Again, I talk about it all the time. The Grizzlies players, they will tell you, when you get into that altitude, things are different. Things are different, but we've seen Memphis win over there. So it's not an excuse or anything, but it is something that you should be aware of if the team gets off to a slow start or, guys are playing more or less minutes than typical. But the thing about that Utah team is they have 8 guys averaging over 8 points per game at this point. To put that in comparison here, we know how deep the Grizzlies are. We talk about it all the time. The Grizzlies can go deep within this roster. They struggled to figure out, and they didn't struggle, but it was tough to cut someone to get that thing down to 15 because they had so many impactful guys. But the Grizzlies have 6 guys averaging 8 or more points. So Utah has 8 guys on that thing. And then I mentioned some similarities to the Grizzlies' identity, right? Well, check this out. Utah's first in steals. Sounds familiar, Grizzlies fans? Third in assists. No, that sounds familiar too. Fourth in rebounding. Another thing that should sound familiar to you. And they score over 118 points per game. The Grizzlies are right above them at 119.8 points per game. So again, all those things sound familiar, to the Grizzlies' identity. But it's not just that. Utah is, quite frankly, been better statistically in the aforementioned areas outside of the scoring. Assists per game. Utah's averaging 29.2 assists. The Grizzlies are averaging 24.2. Grizzlies are 20th in the NBA. Utah is third in the league. Steals per game. Utah pacing the association. 10.6 steals per game. The Grizzlies are averaging 6 steals per game. That's 26th in the NBA. Even blocks, they're tick for tat. The Grizzlies 6.2 blocks per game, 9th in the NBA. Utah 6 blocks a game, 10th in the NBA. Rebounding, that's always one of the Grizzlies' biggest strengths. 48.6 rebounds per game for Utah. They're 4th in the NBA. The Grizzlies are 12th at 44.8 rebounds per game. The thing about Utah that I think is fun, and it's going to be fun for the Grizzlies too, because in a way, the Grizzlies were comparable in the past few seasons before Ja Morant just took this superstar type rise. But Utah has 8 guys averaging 8 or more points. Quite frankly, you don't know which guy is going to be that guy on any given night. You could say, hey, Lauri Markkanen leads them with 22 points per game. Let's make it a point, of emphasis to shut him down. Then you got to worry about the flamethrower, Jordan Clarkson, averaging over 18.8 points and 5 assists per game. Then you got to worry about Kelly Olynyk over 13 points a game. Malik Beasley, Grizzly fans will remember that name from that Timberwolves series last season. Then Colin Sexton, the young bull, right? Started the season off strong, hasn't played a lot of minutes, been dealing with some injuries. They're listing him. He's day-to-day over there. We'll see if he plays in this game. Then you got Mike Conley, who, a Grizzlies legend around here, averaging over 7.8 assists. We know how he gets on defense with those steals, 1.6 steals per game and 10.4 points. Then you got Jared Vanderbilt dominating the glass. I'll say Jared Vanderbilt, of all the players in the NBA, I think when it comes to like meeting Ja Morant at the rim and just using his versatility. In that Timberwolves series, the entire team was walling Ja Morant up. But Jared Vanderbilt and his defense was a big reason why Ja Morant struggled in that series more than, in any other playoff series we've seen him participate in. So Jared Vanderbilt's a tough guy as well. Taylor Horton-Tucker, a guy they traded for, got from the Los Angeles Lakers and averaging over 8 points per game. So they have a lot of different guys who can come at you. It's going to be a fun game. The Grizzlies, again, it's all about, compounding these performances together. Ja Morant, Desmond Bane, that duo, another big night for them. But Dillon Brooks, you're still waiting on his first really good game this season. And we mentioned in his first game against Brooklyn, 2 of 13 shooting, 0 of 5 on three-pointers. And all the other starters were at least plus 17. He had 4 points, and he was plus 7 in 24 minutes. Then you go back to this game against the Kings. Again, all the other starters finished with a positive plus-minus. Dillon Brooks, minus 7 in 26 minutes. 11 points, 2 rebounds, 2 assists. Did show some signs from three-point range, which I thought was especially encouraging. 3 of 6 on three-pointers, but overall shot 4 of 12 from the field. So some struggles there still for Dillon Brooks. They're going to need him to play better. They're going to want him to play better. There's a possibility that you could get John Conchar back as well. That'll deepen the bench. As we mentioned, going into this altitude, probably want to tone back the guys' minutes a little bit. So get John Conchar back to go with Jake LaRavia, in that three-point shooting off the bench, Tyus Jones. And you're waiting on the David Roddy game. Now, we've seen, because people probably wonder, what's his strengths? Well, I like when he drives the basketball, and it's when he drives the basketball, he has that frame and that size. He uses his body, and he can kind of, shield off defenders and finish around the basket. We haven't seen enough of that. We've seen too much of the shooting from David Roddy. And I want to see more of him, take the ball off the dribble, get to the basket, use that size that he was gifted with, that football background, as you say. So he uses more of that. I think that'll lead to more success. And at the end of the day, that's a patience thing, right? That'll come down to, quite frankly, him getting more time, him getting more adjusted, and just being more comfortable with the NBA speed. But that game against Utah, a 4-1 record for Utah, I'm saying, and that's important because up to this point, Grizzlies opponents, the opponents that they've played in the first 5 games, a combined 7-15 record. So this game against Utah, you're playing a 4-1 team that's tied atop the Western Conference with the Grizzlies. Going to be a fun matchup. Always good to see Mike Conley. Rudy Gay, I believe, is out with an injury right now, so won't get to see Rudy Gay. For the real throwback Grizzlies fans that remember when Dynamite Rudy Gay was tearing down the rims and high-flying in FedEx Forum. But once again, thank you for making Locked On Grizzlies your first listen. And before you go, make sure you go over to make Locked On Sports Today your next listen. Again, it's the biggest stories of the day. It's the instant reaction, the big game recaps, and you always get the take of the day. You want to check out that take of the day because it's usually something strong and powerful, but go check it out. It's available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get them. You can go check out Locked On Sports Today. Thank you again for tuning in, Grizzlies fans, to Locked On Grizzlies. I appreciate you. My co-host, Joe Mullinax, he appreciates you as well. We'll see you again on Monday when we recap this game against the Utah Jazz coming up. And then we get into this next matchup because now we'll have one matchup against Utah Jazz to review to go into that next matchup. They're going to play the Jazz twice. They play the Jazz Saturday, then they'll play the Jazz Monday. Both games on the road. The only 2 times they'll visit the Utah in the regular season. So thank you again for tuning in to Locked On Grizzlies. Until next time, I'm your host, Damichael Cole. We'll see you then.